Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in 10, 9. Oh, and do the countdown. Pleasure to be with everybody. I'm Mike Carter, co-author of the book with Mr. Mo around building a mission corporation, which I'm excited to talk about later today. But I'm super stoked to be here with these great entrepreneurs around our topic today, brand new, building brands that reflect values. And in the panel before with the great Sherry Phillips from Forbes and Whitney Shaw from ACBJ, they talked about AI and the threat of AI. And I think that's a theme that we've seen. And based on Michael's presentation earlier about the impact of AI and how quick it's become so dominant, I think it's really something that I think with each of these panels we're going to talk about more and more. But the interesting thing I think about brands, bringing it to this panel, is I think brands and what you stand for and values matter more than ever, if you think about it, with the advent of artificial intelligence. Because it's no longer just about, and this was one of the things why Michael and I did the book, it's no longer just about decision science orientation and making the optimal decision. Because now, guess what? You don't necessarily need to go to Harvard to figure that out. You can check out ChatGPT. But now it's about what you stand for as a brand, as a business, and what that promise is to you. So someone once said to me, or I think a book I read, that the idea of a brand, it's basically how you feel when you see that product or you hear that name. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So 4 amazing panelists. We did this very organically. Unlike Sherry from Forbes, who's Chief Business Officer of Forbes, who was very organized, I could tell that they had conference calls on it and so on and so forth. We did not, which I think will make it more fun maybe. So with that said, I'd love it if each of the panelists would go through and give their backgrounds and their businesses, and then we'll get into the meat of the panel. So we'll start with Taylor.
Hello. All right, what's up, y'all? Welcome to Dallas. I'm a Dallas-based entrepreneur, born and raised. I'm the founder and CEO of Stemuli Studios. We are most known for launching an educational metaverse in August of 2021, about 30 days before Facebook changed their name to Meta. We developed everything that we did side by side with the Dallas Independent School District, the second largest school district in Texas. They have about 140,000 students. Over 80% of them are economically disadvantaged. Over 77% are a majority minority. So we're doing the Lord's work here. But you know, the bottom line of what we do at Stemuli is we're using video games and AI to provide a pathway for every student and every learner to obtain an intellectually and financially fulfilling career. So I look forward to this panel to share a little bit more about who we are and more about our brand that we show up in every space that we walk into.
Hi, good morning. My name is Denise Gallucci, and I have been in the brick and mortar education sector for my entire career. So when you look at building brands with values, that is what we stand for. So I've been in the public, private, not-for-profit, for-profit sector of education, and am currently investing in early learning through K-12 schools. So we build systems of schools across the Americas to teach the next generation of learners. And I'm excited to talk about how it is that we're building our brand and ensuring that the values that we instill within our brand are within our students.
Awesome. Ryan?
Hi, my name is Ryan Evans. So about 10 years ago, over 10 years ago now, I came back from working in Afghanistan as a Department of the Army civil servant. And I got back to Washington, where I live, which I know is everyone's favorite city, especially in Texas. And I felt like I wasn't learning anymore from what I was reading online. Media was going in this very clickbaity direction due to the rise in online ad revenues and sales. And I felt like people like me who really were interested in niche media and expertise were left behind. But by contrast, I was learning a lot from friends and mentors who had been in the military, been in government, been in academia, and I started War on the Rocks really as a hobby that ended up becoming a business. And it was really to stoke and provoke a better conversation about strategy. My other company, which is newer, which I just started last year, so Warner Rocks turns 10 this year. Bedrock just turned 1. And it really is a natural outgrowth of that. It's the first social network that centers learning via coursework, serious games, war games, and intelligence streams. And it's for everyone from the armed services to the Fortune 1000. We have our first customer, and I'm excited to talk about how these brands really feed into each other. So thank you.
Awesome. Grant?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Grant Elliott. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not a Dallas native. I actually live in Virginia, but I'm not a Virginia native either. My company is Ostendio. We're a risk management and cybersecurity platform. We've been running it for about 10 years. We're venture backed. Prior to that, I worked for a triple bottom line company. We did a lot of mobile health applications in Eastern Africa, South America, and various other parts of the world, and then eventually launched probably the largest mobile application in the US with the White House in the US called Text for Baby. But before that, I was very much on the corporate side of the world with telecoms, with AT&T, and a lot of big telecom companies. So I've kind of gone full corporate, triple bottom line, to now basically running my own company.
That's awesome. One of the, I think, best accents in the world, the Glaswegian accent. It's not even Scottish, right? It's Glaswegian. So we were connected to Grant recently, probably over a year ago, right after the book was written or really out. And do you want to tell the story about how you came across the book and became a Mission Corporation?
Sure. So about 2 years ago, we were interviewing as we were hiring, and when I set up the company 10 years ago, it was our intent to be a very values-based organization. I like to say that you start a company when you're 25, it's all about making money. You start a company when you're 45, it has to be more than that, right? And I had lots of experiences in my previous life where there needed to be more to just being successful. There needed to be more than just building or making money. And so we started very much earlier with the premise, that we built a set of values, core values for the organization. We joined Pledge 1%, and we would commit to give 1% of product profit to socially oriented causes. And when I was interviewing someone and I was talking about all the values of the company, again, why we believed that we were a little bit different, they said to me, "You sound just like a Mission Corp. Have you read that book?" And I'd never read the book, and suddenly I thought, oh my goodness, what am I missing? I've heard of conscious capitalism, I've heard of all these different things. What have I missed here? And so I'm Googling, as you do while they're talking to you, to try and not appear so stupid. And I kind of, after I got off the phone with them, I kind of ordered the book, I read it. And for me, what it really, I mean, it wasn't just that Adam Smith is Scottish, but, there was obviously a part of that, right?
I was going to go there next.
Yeah. But it was really that it really kind of put into probably a better perspective what we were already doing. We really resonated with it. I like to say that we were a Mission Corp before Mission Corp existed. And so I went to the board, right, and my next board meeting, and I basically presented to the board, and I said, look, we want to publicly declare as a Mission Corporation. And you can imagine there was a little bit of chagrin with that because they suddenly thought we were going to become a non-profit, right? And when I basically gave the presentation, outlined, the 10 declarations that outlined, in my view, my intent of the book, they were actually amazingly very much on board with that. And we've been a Mission Corp for now, I guess, 2 years, coming up for 2 years. And in preparation for this session, I kind of, did a kind of all hands with my team and, asked them, what does it mean to you? And it's probably one of the most emotional all hands we've ever had, where, just genuinely, the people within the organization, many of whom had joined because of our values-driven organization, many who had stayed through sometimes some difficult times, simply because of the culture that we have within the organization that kind of comes around from being a Mission Corporation. So for me, I'd like to thank Michael personally for taking the time to write the book, because it's kind of created a format and a structure that we've built a company around, and I'm very proud to have done that.
Thank you, Grant. When we first got the email from Grant, I remember, I don't know if I forwarded it to Michael or Michael forwarded it to me, and we were like, check this out. So Grant said, how many Mission Corporations are there? I go, Grant, there's a ton. There's a ton of Mission Corporations. But Grant was one of the first, and certainly the first SaaS-based security software company doing it. So thank you, Grant, for that. One of the things, Michael and I will talk about later, but he brought up Adam Smith. So Michael talked about today how Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations. But before Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations, he wrote this book called The Theory on Moral Sentiments. And it was basically 12 years before it. And it was about having a basis of morality. Not necessarily religion, but morality. So you can see how if someone just read The Wealth of Nations and you run a hedge fund in New York or whatever, then you go into the strict interpretation of the free market versus how does that relate to having values and morality. And I read somebody told me a great quote about liberty, that liberty is freedom with virtue. So I think what we're building here with our brands is like mission capitalism is capitalism with virtue, or mission capitalism is capitalism with purpose. So with that, Taylor, you have a challenge because you're building a brand in the metaverse in a sense too, and building the brand of your business. So discuss that a little bit in terms of what that's like, building such a virtual brand that has to be important and transcend values.
Yeah, just to first talk about mission corporations, right? You have the heart of a nonprofit and the ambition of a for-profit. Sitting in the education space, most people automatically categorize us as you're a nonprofit organization. Well, one of my first mentors out of Silicon Valley, when I was 13 years ago, dropped out of college to do this work, he said, Taylor, if you go into a nonprofit, then your salary or your net worth will always be just your salary. And so for me, it became, speaking of values and just like moral obligation, I feel an obligation to make as much money as possible because of how I want to give it away and because of my knowledge and the spaces that I've operated in. It's a fact that I know information about public schools, K through 12 kids, black and brown kids, low income kids at a rate that maybe nobody in this room understands because I've been there. Because I am the kid with PTSD that grew up in a house that even though on the outside it looked like everything was going great, we still had some of these generational traumas that people from my community face. And so, that's just a backstory on me that, I feel like I am called to this earth to do the work that I'm doing, to act as a voice of the next generation. You would be surprised how many corporate spaces I show up in, and people are talking about, oh, kids are creators, the creator economy, and then they have no idea that K through 12 education is not preparing our students to be that. Just circling back around to all of this, it's a hard place to be in the K through 12 space because when you look at venture capitalists, 99.9 out of 100 of them will tell you they do not touch K through 12 education. But it has to be somebody's moral obligation to say, well, the buck stops here, even though only 1% of black founders get venture capital funding, less than that of black women get funding, and then you put me in education, like I'm probably 1 out of 1 of black founders that have ever raised over $1 million worth of venture capital, and I need $100 million. So, for me, and I think the call to action for you, if you want to be a mission corporation, it should be in your DNA. It should show up in literally everything that you do, from the people that you hire, the products that you design, the care that you take, and the products that you design. And then quickly, did y'all notice my outfit? I show up this way because kids love fashion. And I want kids in the next generation to look in a room like this and see me and say, hey, she looks like me. Or I don't have to show up in a space and be in a blue jacket in a suit. I can show up in my Jordans. I can show up in my favorite hat. I can show up in my favorite color. So representation matters and authenticity matters. And that's something I carry with me in literally every conversation and every space that I go into.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Taylor. Before we get to Denise, Grant, you had a similar conversation with a venture capitalist about being a mission corporation and how it aligned. Do you want to just briefly, before we get to Denise, talk about that?
Sure. I mean, I think this goes to the concept of the difference between, I guess, virtual signaling and being authentic, right? It's not easy to take this path, right? There are many choices you have. And to me, I always kind of feel like the proof of your whether you're intentional about this, whether you're authentic with this, is not how you're performing or how you're doing it when times are good, right? It's easy to come to events like this and talk about it. It's when, all the marbles are on the line. And so we were raising a Series A, and we were getting down to the final conversations with the kind of primary venture fund we were talking to. And I stopped the conversation and basically said, okay, before, there's a number of things that are important to us as an organization. And one of them is we're a value-driven company. We're going to make decisions and growth based on values. We're not going to put profit above everything else. And if you're not okay with that, you're not the right venture company. Now, all the time I'm saying this, there's this little voice in the back of my head going, what are you doing? Seriously, right? These guys are offering you a lot of money, and it's going to be fundamentally influential in how your company is going to be successful or not, right? But it was really important to have that conversation right at the beginning of the relationship with them. And in the end, it worked out well because they were all in and they believed it, and we got all the platitudes that this is exactly what we want to invest in companies like yours, etc. And actually, believe it or not, made them want to invest in us even more. But it's making those decisions in that particular time, in those moments. It's basically sticking to your ethics, sticking to your morals, not when it's easy, but when it's hard, that is going to differentiate whether you're actually truly involved in this or whether it's just, show.
Totally. Denise?
So, interestingly, I thought that if you're in the K-12 education space, you have to be not-for-profit, because for-profit education is manufacturing dollars off the backs of kids. And so nonprofit education was good, and for-profit education was bad. And I started a system of schools in Connecticut out of a Supreme Court case, Sheff versus O'Neill, that said the children in Hartford were separate but not equal, denied their constitutional right to equal access to high-quality education. Hartford, Connecticut is the second poorest city in America of its size, situated in one of the richest states in the nation. And we started this system of schools. 30% of graduates in the Hartford public schools were graduating on time. We launched 26 schools, greenfield, graduated 98.8% of all kids on time. But I recognized that we were doing great work on such a small scale. And I was reliant on lobbying the General Assembly for more funding and writing grants. And so we were really constricted in terms of what we could do, how fast we could grow, all of the approvals that were necessary. And then I found, GEMS Education, which is the largest for-profit provider of K-12 education globally, found me. And I was convinced that it was about the values within the organization in the K-12 space and not necessarily the business model behind it. And that if you could control your margins, you could control your growth, you could raise money, you could borrow money. There were ways in which you could apply the values that you should have in a not-for-profit K-12 in a for-profit. And so I think that's where, for me, the awakening happened, which, you know what? If we're able to do this at scale, 250,000 students across 25 countries, and allocate a significant portion of our profits to scholarships to ensure that we're giving all students, as many students as we possibly can, access to high-quality private education, it then changes their socioeconomic stature and status in society. And we can equip these students with the tools and the skills to sit side by side with super affluent students, and then the network begins to change. And so I saw this evolution of how this happens, and it's about good quality education, solid values, and those you inculcate into your system. And then I decided to go out on my own and to do it again. And so I've partnered with a larger group now, and we're building a system of schools across the Americas focused on exactly the same thing. It's a for-profit company, but for-profit in the term of a business model. And a business model so that we can reach scale, so that we can properly educate the citizenry that we need to lead us into the future, that we need to solve these threats that we see with AI. And Ryan and I were talking before the panel of it's so much in education is stopping and saying, no, we can't have that. We can't have these types of technologies in the classroom. No, AI is bad and we're banning ChatGPT across everything. As opposed to saying, these are tools that we have, and how do we equip our students with the tools necessary to understand what's right and how to apply morals and values in what they do to make good decisions. And so I think it's about how you apply the business model and the values that you do so within, so that you can reach a larger audience and help more kids.
Great. Brian?
Yeah, I was turned on to your book much more recently by Catherine Merrick when she invited me to this conference earlier this year. And when I read it, I was pleasantly surprised about how much it resonated and how much of it we were just already doing. Both companies. Both are fundamentally in the knowledge economy. Both are about human capital in their DNA, and all the rest of it as well. So War on the Rocks really came out of not just my desire to learn from more experienced people, but my frustration that what I had seen in Afghanistan was not reflected in conversations in Washington, D.C. And if you want to come up to me after, we can talk more about in detail about that. And that our service members deserved a lot more than that and weren't getting it. And a lot of people involved in decisions of war and peace had not been to the places where their decisions have impact, and trying to bridge that gap. Bedrock is motivated by much the same thing. The world is changing very quickly, and we need to understand what's going on, whether it's emerging technologies, whether it's, you just think of the variety of organizations affected by the blockade of Ukraine earlier in the war. That's everyone from the Navy to McDonald's to the UN. And, so I was very pleasantly surprised about how much this matched up, and encouraged to talk more about that.
Awesome. Taylor brought up something which is dear to my heart in terms of being able to do well, to give back. And so the thing that I'm so blown away with at SMU, and the purpose and mission of SMU, and everything that Michael and the GSV team, Catherine, Peggy, Owen, everybody's put together here, is that I think we're moving beyond politics. We're moving beyond, color of people's skin. We're moving beyond gender, because if you can connect on purpose and mission, it's kind of all that matters. So Taylor's point about doing well to give back, part of the book that's it's at the end, whatever, a part that I'm super passionate about is this idea that if you are a mission corporation, one day what we'd love to happen is, and Taylor sells her business for hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars, why should her tax rate, and I know this hurts a socialist from Scotland who loved Nicola Sturgeon, who's proved to be fairly corrupt, so sorry about that. But just recently, it's in the news, it's the facts.
It's on the internet, it must be true.
Yeah, but low taxes.
Say we were getting beyond politics?
Yeah, I know, I'm just having fun. He's Scottish, so it's part of the United Kingdom. They're not going to break away. But so, no, but Taylor, so part of this is the ability, if you're a mission corporation, to have the lowest tax rate. And if you think about it, I don't think, so getting back to beyond politics, that's not a Republican or a Democratic issue, because Republicans say no taxes, but that tax policy shouldn't inform behavior, right? And Democrats, right, the idea is to pay your fair share. Well, if Taylor's building a mission corporation and everybody has shares of stock and she's giving back, I think she's doing her fair share. So the fact that she has an equity event one day, she should have lower taxes. So I'd like to open it up. It's not necessarily about building brands, but I think it is about this idea about, I think entrepreneurs, right, change the world, right? They fix things, they do things that no one else can dream about at the time, and they take risks and they employ folks. So if you're a mission corporation and you're giving back and you're following these 7 declarations, which we'll talk about later, why shouldn't you have lower taxes than somebody who might own 100% of their corporate company that doesn't give back? Taylor, start with you.
Well, I love the thought, right? And to that point, when I look at the work that we're doing in Dallas, when we're successful, I want it to be like we're building the next Apple in Dallas. And with that, what we're already doing is hiring students straight out of high school that have been through certain programs that are qualified to work for us. And so you're right. The more money that Stemuli has and the more cash available, the more jobs, the more investments that we're able to make in order to see that our values and our mission sustains itself. And, just real quickly on that, building a metaverse, you asked me about, what is it like to build this brand in the metaverse? Right now, it's a new frontier. It's a gold rush. It's an opportunity it's like the equal playing field is the way I see the metaverse and the work that we're doing, because anybody in this room can decide that they want to figure out something in the metaverse, and you can own it, and you can be a first mover. And we haven't had that opportunity since I don't know when in American history for us all to be equal to grab that frontier. And so, when I think about the investment that I would make when one day this rule is true about a mission corporation, I'm thinking about every single marginalized person, every single person that has any sort of disability that our physical world doesn't allow for. So when you think about how many tax incentives come to a company moving to a city, or if you want to revitalize the National in downtown Dallas, you have so many tax incentives. Well, why not? Why not give incentives to companies that are saying, hey, those ADA rules that at one point in time never existed that came about, we are literally doing all of that in this digital world, and it should be honored in a way that we can continue to give back to society.
Totally. Denise?
Interestingly, as I think about the way in which we approach, I think if you think about the K-12 space, we should be giving back in a way that, as I think about, I lost the question.
Yeah. No, so just about taxes. But so this is bringing up something interesting from your last conversation, though.
Oh, I got it.
So if you ask, I think Michael always uses this quote in his decks at ASU+GSV Summit and stuff about seventh graders. If you ask seventh graders, 67% of seventh graders they want to be entrepreneurs when they grow up. If you ask them, we all know that rate plummets to like less than 1%, after college. So when you think about what Taylor's building with the metaverse, the argument could be the killer application for the metaverse is to make education more available to everyone. If you think about what's going on with the metaverse and what you're doing from a K through 12 perspective.
So very specifically on the tax issue, it's the not there. We talked about the business model previously. The not-for-profit schools benefit from the fact that they don't have to pay real estate taxes, they don't have to pay corporate tax, and they're able to do what they do with a similar business model with having the benefit of not paying taxes. And so I think as it relates to the overall tax structure, that is something that if schools like ours, which we're giving 20% scholarships, and we have equity ownership for members of our team, and looking to bring that down to the every single teacher who works for us having a piece of equity ownership, I do believe that we should be able to benefit in a way that allows us to further give back even more.
Totally. Right.
I'll just be very quick. I live on Capitol Hill, and so I try to not talk about tax policy that much. But I will say I think it's a great idea. I think it's a win-win, and I've spoken to friends of mine in Congress about it on both sides and have been encouraged that there's some openness to the idea.
Before we go to Grant, who wants to be a contrarian on this topic he just said, there is a program in the UK called the Entrepreneurs Relief Program, which basically was if you created I just thought this made so much sense because when I was building BizEquity in the early years, we had an investor from the UK, and the angel investors benefited from this, but also if the company was domiciled in the UK, they would have. But if you build a company in the United Kingdom and you sell it, and the first 10 million pounds of proceeds, if you built 10 jobs in the community and it existed for more than 2 years, was 10%. So do I think it was, why did fintech companies, a lot of great fintech companies get born in the UK? I think it was because of that. And I just say, I think we have a real opportunity with the mission movement as we build these brands to also try to inform policy for that, because I don't think it's a political issue, because it's about people staying in their communities, people building up their communities, people having everyone have equity in their firms and driving these companies. So now Grant's going to try to.
Can I just ask the moderator a quick question? Is how engaged are you in Washington on trying to push this policy?
So that's something post the summit that Michael and I want to, but we've tested the waters a little bit the last 6 to 9 months on it.
So being Scottish, I will be the contrarian. But I will say, look, Virginia, by the way, has that same tax policy you just mentioned. The UK, Virginia has the same one. So I will personally benefit from that. But that's, to me, not what it's about. And I also go back to the point in the Mission Corporation, one of the things, the declarations, as you say, is that a minimum of 10% of equity should be aligned to the employees. I'm pleased to say in our organization, we give over 23% of our equity is aligned to our employees, because we try to be very generous in terms of giving back from that perspective. Here's my slight counterpoint, right? And it's not that I don't agree that tax policy should be used to incentivize investment. I think what a lot of us doing is really, really hard. For me, what attracted me to the Mission Corporation was it's a philosophy. It's pure, right? You're doing it because it's the right thing to do, not because there's a financial incentive to do it. And what worries me about aligning it with specific tax incentives is we've already talked about virtual signaling. We've already talked about, some of the challenges with things like B corporations. We have a whole industry of nonprofit, right? Which, for better or for worse, has good organizations, bad organizations. Tax policy is not the reason for why people do good, right? People do good because you try and incentivize them through different ways. I'm not saying that there couldn't be a tax policy around investments, because I think the challenge that I find, despite all the conversations and the good incentives from some of the investors that are here today, Silicon Valley very much focuses on return on investment, right? I mean, there's absolute doubt there. And, there's an expression that, history is written by the victor, right? Well, in Silicon Valley, history is written by the person with the biggest marketing budget, right? And so in my industry, I'm in cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is not done well, right? Cybersecurity in this country is broken, right? There's too much focus today on making money through building cyber defense tools, through getting through different audits. And the problem is, as long as companies are making money from that, then that's going to continue to happen, right? I would like to see more government policy on things like, investing in organizations building effective and proper cybersecurity. So it's not that I disagree with tax policy. I wouldn't want the Mission Corp to be sullied by a financial incentive, when for me, the purity of it is about the kind of ethical alignment.
Totally. And we've had this debate maybe 6 months ago over a few beers. So I'm used to, I know his argument a little bit. And I would just say the first 10,000, I totally agree, it has to be pure, the first 10,000 Mission Corporations. But if our goal is to have 1 million Mission Corporations in 30 years, you have to also align incentives. And I think the good that it would do would outdo the virtue signaling for some. But
create the influence, and then go into education, find the areas that you think tax policy, and then use the influence you have with these organizations to direct policy in the areas that maybe are underinvested, I think is my view.
Awesome. So lightning round a little bit. Taylor, so in your background, you worked at Apple.
Yeah.
That is, if you think about Apple's brand, right, one of the most, maybe the most valuable brand in the world. What do you think that they really did incredibly well?
I love Apple. I have an Apple tattoo on my back, right where it is on your iPhone. So, and I did that well before I thought I could work at Apple. So I'm like, for those of you not from Dallas, you might have no idea about the area I'm talking about. But there's an area in Dallas called Bishop Arts. It's in Oak Cliff, and it's basically pretty much in the middle of the hood. I had a conversation with the CEO of that organization, and I asked him, tell me more about how you designed this place, because I lived in the neighborhood, and out of every place I've lived in Dallas, I felt like I belonged the most there. And he said, you can tell when people love what they do because it's like the attention to detail. It's the small things. And so as far as Apple and my respect for them, it started when I convinced my mom that I could only go to college with a little white MacBook computer, and that was not true at the time, but I convinced her of that. And as I was using the technology, everything mattered to them. They didn't cut a single corner. It didn't matter if it was the keyboard, the click of the mouse, the way that the screen looked, the edge and bevel. They decided we're going to go all the way there. And so for me, you can see in Apple the fact that they love the people that they're serving because they care to develop products that people will love. You can tell that they love what they do. You can tell Steve Jobs was obsessed with delivering this type of product and value to the world. So as far as like what they do right, one, it's the love that you can see in every part of their product. And I will compare it to Android. You know, everybody's picked up an Android phone that like is plastic and it doesn't feel good. If you hold an Apple product in your hand, you feel good. And then the second thing is Apple was one of the first corporations that had the best policies around belonging, is what I'll call it, instead of calling it DEI, because I think DEI started, especially we're in Texas, y'all. So it's weird. It's weird. But just like quick backstory, like I was a little gay kid in Texas growing up with a mom that was from a small town. The Bible was in my DNA. From 2nd to 8th grade, I studied the Bible, and I read, and I believed every single word in it, and I still do. And I say that because my experience that most people can't see on me is that I didn't feel like I belonged in places. So going back to Apple, Apple set a culture of belonging around everything that they do. And that's something that I strive to do, not only in like the love that we put into the product, but belonging that people feel working for our company, people feel interacting with me or anybody around us.
That's awesome. Denise, in K through 12 education, what do you think that we can be doing, you can be doing to instill kind of that type of mission orientation, branding in the kids in terms of what you stand for at your organization?
So as Taylor was talking, that's what we strive for every child, every teacher to feel that sense of belonging, to know that the Bible could be in your DNA, but who you are as an individual is what's most important. And so we look at kind of 4 key aspects: purpose, passion, integrity, and grit. And so what is your purpose? Is your purpose aligned with our mission of bettering society? Are you super passionate about that you'll break down walls for every single child, every single family, to make sure that they get the resources that they need? Do you deliver the curricula with the highest level of integrity? Do you teach students to ask questions, to solve problems one question at a time? And just that grit, that relentless pursuit of excellence to ensure that students have what they need to be able to sit on panels like this and build companies in the metaverse and change the world. And so I am so obsessively committed to every child that enrolls with us, to building this system of schools that generates the entrepreneurs of the future, the nurses and doctors and people who are solving our problems today.
That's awesome. So, right, to protect and serve, right, the U.S. military, not a bigger mission than that and purpose for that. Any aspects from your background in terms of what you've seen that you're bringing into your business in terms of how you're building your mission brand?
Yeah, so when I worked in the Department of the Army, one of the things that I discovered was how passionate service members actually are about learning and disseminating ideas and trying to learn lessons. You know, there's a difference between lessons identified and lessons learned that we get hung up on a lot in all sorts of facets of our life in government. But that's really informed everything that I've done, is taking these people who have the most skin in the game you can have possible and applying their passion for learning to these really high stakes decisions in a nutshell.
Awesome. Do you have anything to say, Grant?
Yeah, let me just. I always have something to say, right? So I grew up in the west coast of Scotland in a somewhat economically challenged environment, and we were kind of really brought up with 2 main beliefs, right? It wasn't a particularly religious family, but we, hard work and looking out for others. That was basically the core of whatever. We can have a separate conversation on faith because, I have a personal faith that maybe isn't organized, but, that was what we brought up. And, I've tried to instill that through my life and through everything I've done. I'll tell you a quick anecdote. I worked for AT&T, and I talk about the big corporate monster. This was kind of the early 2000s. Telecom was kind of on the downslide. And we were going through about our third or fourth round of layoffs. And I remember being on this conference call with one of our senior vice presidents and a lot of the VPs. And the original topic of the conversation was about how do we manage morale within the organization since we keep laying people off and it's not a great environment. And this conversation went round in circles for 40 minutes with all these different things they could do. The conversation ended, right, with the thought that these people are fine. They had the privilege of working for AT&T for a period of time. They're lucky to have that on their resume. So actually, they owe us, not the other way around. I left a few months later, right? And I think the reason I say this is because it comes back to this concept that, I really can have this passion about virtual signaling. The proudest part I think we have about being a mission corporation, as I said, is that conversation we had on Friday, right? When, the people coming on, we did it after we did a culture survey, and all these people that have different perspectives, and the conversation you had about DEI, we have a group in Denver, and DEI is not the most popular term, right? But actually, when you look beyond the terminology, everyone actually has the same feeling. Everyone wants to look out for each other. Everyone generally has each other's back. Everyone wants to be part of something that's bigger than just coming to work every day and making money. And for me, that's the essence of it. It really just comes down to this concept of community. If you can align that with a purpose, if you can align that with an achievement where everyone is basically focused on doing the same thing, and they genuinely believe they're in it together, right? Not one more than another, not some person being more successful than another. Everyone believes that they're playing an equal part. Then I believe that that's the sense of what we're trying to build.
And one of the things you did, besides have a head of human capital or head of human talent or whatever for the organization, is you also had a head of culture. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so I've been doing this for 10 years, and about 2 years ago, I started to realize this is hard, right? It's really hard to come in. When you're running a business, and it's been mentioned before, there's highs, there's lows, there's days that you're crushing it, and there's days that you're really not. But as the CEO of an organization, those days when it's not going well, those days when you're a few days away from payroll or whatever, and you're not sure you're going to make it, you still have to come in every day, and you have to give it everything. You have to let everyone go there. And that's really hard to do day in, day out, right? And as a CEO, I took the decision that you can't drive this part-time. I can't do my day job and drive culture as well. So we were only a small organization at that point. We were only about 20 people at that time. And I made the deliberate attempt to basically hire someone to basically be my director of HR, talent management, all this. But the first conversation I had with her is, look, we have this culture that we have to drive. We have this belief that I passionately believe, and I will give you everything that you need to keep that alive. Everything. I'll give you my time. I'll give you the budget. I'll give you the tools, I'll give you the resources. I just ask for one thing in return. When it gets hard, you don't give up. And 2 years on, she's been amazing. Absolutely amazing. Is the heartbeat of the organization right now. And, and the culture surveys that she drives, and we do, weekly brown bags, we do volunteering as a team. She drives so much collective behavior within the organization that I'm eternally grateful, because I can't do it myself, right? I've got too many other, I just support her.
It's awesome. So to bookend this panel, everyone's been amazing on the panel, so thank you. When we began the conversation, it was the idea that based on the last panel that went through and Michael's presentation, that AI is like such a mega trend or giga trend that's going through the whole economy and through the whole world, and the proliferation of ChatGPT being the fastest technology ever absorbed. And what I think is so amazing about this topic around brand is, as we talked about, brands matter more than ever, because that's going to be the differentiation, how somebody feels about your brand and what values more and more they're going to represent. So with that said, it used to be enough 20, 25 years ago, there would be core values on the wall. If you got anybody remembers that, it's like, oh, our core values or our mission statement. And it's always really bad art, and there was core values and mission statement. Sorry if anybody still has that. And now I think what it is it's about what the, as Taylor was talking about Apple, right? What the product stands for, what the brand promise means. Does the brand promise reflect your values? So to bring it home, and you each can we'll start with Taylor. Say one thing, one trick for any member of the audience and for any of us that you think from developing your brand that you've done or you want to do to really drive home the values of what you represent. What's one trick that you've implemented, either social media or digital, otherwise digital or non-digital, bricks and mortar, that you've done to really establish the values that you represent?
When you said the one trick to establish the values, I was going to say the way I dress, but yeah.
Works.
Yeah, that's a deep one. The one trick that I've implemented is hiring those P-Tech students. So in hiring those P-Tech students, I met some of them when they were freshmen in high school, and now they're like juniors in college, and it's impossible for me to forget about the work that we're doing. And these students have literally been with us and seen everything. If the team wasn't getting paid, they weren't getting paid, and they were learning about that when most of us don't ever learn about that until we get into entrepreneurship. But I think that putting our money where our mouth is and actually hiring those kids and spending the money, even though we're taxed, on them to continue driving the mission and continue just speaking to students and teachers about what we're doing is probably the best thing that we ever did at Stemuli.
Awesome.
For me, it's about building it the right way. It's about the who and the hiring of the people. I think there's certainly a lot of schools in the K-12 space, even higher ed, that have great social media presence, that have wonderful brands that they invest a lot in, but don't execute and deliver through their people. And so for me, it's about investing, hiring the right way, and then investing in your people to ensure that they execute on your promise.
Right.
It's really been about keeping our revenue model aligned with what we say we stand for. And I think we're a lot of, in California, we're a lot of the companies that were most utopian in how they were communicating about themselves to the world, and I won't name them, but you all know who they are, ended up behaving the most poorly in terms of how they were discovered to be making money, and especially using other people's data. So with both our companies, our revenue models are just totally aligned with our values, and that keeps temptation at bay and just keeps us on track.
Awesome. Grant, now we have 3 minutes left on the panel. So,
I think what we've really tried to do is get collective buy-in to the purpose, right? Our purpose statement is to reduce risk by improving security for all. And we use that as a North Star for any difficult decisions that we actually make. And we talk a lot as a collective group to make sure that's what we're doing. And that, transcribes itself in lots of different ways. It means speaking truth, right, to our employees, to our shareholders, to our customers, right? We will not sell a product that we do not believe that meets that mission, right? We will not build a product, or we will not sell from a sales strategy perspective or send out marketing that does not subscribe to that. So, and I think that's kind of refreshing for everyone within the organization, because they know there's a line we won't go beyond. And some of the comments again came in the session on Friday was that success is not just measured by whether we are having a good month from a sales perspective. It's measured by the feedback we get from our clients. It's measured by the kind of intensity and the relationships we develop with our clients and internally.
Thank you very much, and pleasure to be with everybody. Let's have a round of applause for our great panelists.